Please note, the following episode contains mature language.
Bangkok, Thailand, 2012.
One of my girls, a trader, she was one of the girls that worked for us. She was a Southern Thai girl.
In a conference room, a young Thai woman known as Yin was holding a meeting with staff. Yin was the head of the Thailand offices for Leonard Francis, the largest US Navy contractor in the Pacific, and she had a problem. Leonard's company, Glenn Defense Marine Asia, was the focus of an ever-expanding fraud probe by Navy investigators, the NCIS. And Yin, under pressure from Leonard, was trying to get him out of the mess. As Yin talked, one of her female staff leaned in over the table. The two women didn't like each other and often were at loggerheads in the office. And now, unknown to Yin, the woman was about to exact the ultimate office revenge. Under her clothes, she was wearing a wire.
She hated the manager, Yin, and so they wired her up and then was trying to record what she was saying, try to corner Yin.
And this was to do with when Teresa Kelly was complaining about costs and port security and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Finally, after years of NCIS investigations going nowhere, this one, pushed by Teresa Kelly, the tenacious Navy supply official in Singapore, had traction. Teresa had suspicions Leonard was overcharging the Navy for fuel and to protect its ships in Thailand. Yin, whose full name was Pornpun Setafakon, had prepared fake invoices from port authorities to justify the exorbitant costs, according to a grand jury indictment. She has pleaded not guilty. As the NCIS agents listened into their headphones, she was caught on tape discussing what to do next. But Leonard was deeply entrenched with the Navy. His top-level connections had allowed him to smother NCIS investigations over and again. He always had inside information, and this time, so he thought, would be no different. What happened then? Because I think it says in the indictment that then that person stopped cooperating afterwards, right?
Yeah, she got scared.
I'm Tom Wright, and this is Fat Leonard, a podcast from Project Brazen. Over the past 7 episodes, we've charted Leonard's improbable rise to become one of the most powerful foreigners in the US military. Leonard's told his own side of the story, however biased, and we've heard from the women whose lives he destroyed. Now, as the NCIS closes in, we'll hear in this episode how Leonard develops a double agent inside the US government. He thinks he's got everything under control, but a woman and mother hurt by his con will be his ultimate undoing. Hello, a quick favor. We're conducting an audience survey, and we'd be really grateful if you could take just a few minutes and answer our questions. Please visit survey.prx.org/brazen to take the survey today. That's survey.prx.org/brazen. Thanks.
Quantico, Virginia, 2012.
The town of Quantico, on the Potomac River, just south of Washington, D.C., is surrounded by a huge Marine base, the FBI Academy, and the Russell Knox Building, home to the NCIS. The building was brand new, completed at a cost of $361 million, and featured an office and training center for 3,000 personnel, a gym, and retail convenience store. It seemed like the drab headquarters of any medium-sized company. Only barbed wire on the perimeter hinted at the classified nature of the work going on within. That August night, most of the employees, the staff of multiple military criminal investigative agencies, had already gone home. John Bellevue II, special agent in charge of the NCIS headquarters, switched on his computer and, looking furtively around, accessed a system called KNet. He tapped away fast as he searched through KNet, which contained all details of ongoing NCIS investigations. In his mid-40s, single, Bellevue had the fleshy face of a heavy drinker, topped with a mop of greying hair, parted at the side. He blended into the background like any suited government bureaucrat. He appeared dedicated to protecting the US Navy, and he'd risen up the ranks. He'd recently been named Agent of the Year in an organization of over 1,000 people and had snagged the sought-after position as director of the Quantico office. This is the stuff of TV dramas. Bellevue should have been solving crimes like Mark Harmon or LL Cool J on NCIS, dressed in a baseball cap and staff jacket. Instead, he was a mole for Leonard, and he had a troubled mind.
Yeah, Bellevue, yeah. He was a nutcase.
Leonard had known Bellevue for several years, back from when he was an NCIS bodyguard for a Navy admiral stationed in Japan.
And so there, that relationship built up. So I invest in the future. Although Bellevue at that time was of no value, but I knew this guy was going to show up again in a different position.
And sure enough, Bellevue was promoted to an NCIS job in Singapore, ensuring the protection of Navy ships. It was then, as investigations into Leonard began to build, that Bellevue started to offer up tidbits. The pair would meet at a Japanese restaurant in the Goodwood Park Hotel, an eclectic Victorian-era building with a turret like a Rhineland castle. Nothing major at first, just office gossip.
He would say, hey, let's meet up. I got something for you, you know? Then he started talking. He goes, hey, they're looking at you, they're looking, start opening up the conversation. Then I said, looking at what? And he goes, no, they were saying that you were doing this and that and this and that. Then he'll just laugh, ha, ha, ha. He'll drink, drink. And that's it. Well, tell me what's going on. And then he goes, yeah, it's stuff they're looking at. You better be careful. I said, so can you give me more information? And they go, yeah, of course. I could do that.
Leonard began to reel Bellevue in. He gave him cash to spend in nightclubs. And of course, he arranged for women, according to court documents.
He had like a manic kind of a personality. And women would never want to be with him because, the way he was. It just gives them this very uneasy feeling.
And where did that come from with him?
Well, I don't know. He claims he has some issues, anger issues. He has a lot of anger issues. He wasn't a very well-liked guy. So, I was kind of like his fake friend.
Bellevue was lonely, had struggled with obsessive-compulsive disorder since a child, and had never experienced a steady relationship, his defense counsel later claimed. After arriving in Singapore, he traveled for work to the small nation of East Timor, where he'd witnessed a beheading. He was in a perturbed state when he came under Leonard's tutelage and would do almost anything the big boss asked.
Well, Bellevue was a volunteer force. I never had to ask him for things. He would just come and put it on my lap. Because, he wanted things from me. He just wanted to get laid. He wanted to get paid. But he was a Geo bachelor and, he drank heavily and he wanted to go out every night.
And slowly, Bellevue began to divulge information about the NCIS investigation, sparked by Teresa Kelly's concerns about overcharging in Thailand.
So he started off with that. It's always an offer. I didn't have to ask. He starts with enticing me. And then once he started giving me information, it's like drugs. I need more, you give me more. Then I started giving him more.
By 2012, Bellevue had transferred to the US, promoted to the Quantico job, where he was in a much better position to act as Leonard's spy. Bellevue knew Special Agent Sats, a longtime NCIS investigator, was leading the probe into allegations GDMA was defrauding the Navy. And so, that August night, he searched for Sants and Glenn and the phrase oral wire intercept court documents show. He was shocked to find a write-up of the recent meeting in Bangkok between Yin and her staff member. Earlier complaints about Leonard, like those from David Schaus, had gone nowhere. This was a serious investigation involving wiretaps. Bellevue reached for his mobile phone and tapped out a panicked message to Leonard in Singapore. We got an actor to read his messages.
I have 30 reports for you. Not good. Your girl in Thailand effed up and got caught on tape.
Leonard and Beliveau quickly exchanged 22 text messages. Leonard was fighting for his survival, and although he won't admit it to me, he or someone else clearly put pressure on the Thai employee to stop cooperating with NCIS agents. What did you guys say to her?
She got scared. I think the word got out that someone was talking to NCIS, so she got afraid.
But she must have found out that you guys knew that she was talking to NCIS, right?
Somebody told her.
And then what, she left?
Yeah, she kind of like got spooked.
Somebody in your office down there.
Yeah, in Thailand.
Beliveau was not happy. He knew Leonard was finally in trouble and that his information was gold. But now in the US, he couldn't get easy access to spending money and prostitutes. He fired off an angry email, according to court documents.
I will always be your friend, but you will get nothing else until I get what you promise. You give whores more money than me. I can be your best friend or your worst enemy. I am not an amateur.
The emails went back and forward, with Beliveau suggesting a payment through Western Union. How had this NCIS star performer become so corrupted? The behavior of this top US military law enforcement agent is scandalous. Leonard has his own theory.
Anybody who joins the NCIS, they're all like third-rated or fourth-rated, All of them are just a bunch of clowns. Wannabes. I call them wannabes. I mean, if you compare them to like FBI, then you see a different caliber of, investigative officers. CIA, FBI.
The NCIS had failed to do anything about Leonard for years, ignoring whistleblowers like David Schaus. With Agent Beliveau in his pocket, Leonard, even now, felt like he had control of the situation. But there was another complication. Belivau's snooping that August night had uncovered a more perilous development than the wiretap in Thailand. As he scrolled through the documents, his eyes alighted on a report that detailed a new cooperating witness in the investigations. It was Marcy Misiewicz, the estranged wife of Commander Michael Misiewicz.
Yokosuka, Japan, 2012.
On Father's Day, Michael Misiewicz had plans to improve his relationship with his two eldest children. There were strains after he'd hit Marcy, and Michael had been cast out to live on the USS Blue Ridge. He picked the kids up from the family home on base and brought them to Tokyo for dinner. The next day, the Navy had organized a family cruise on the Blue Ridge, back to the base in Yokosuka. At dinner that evening, there were two unexpected guests, Leonard Francis and Edmondo Ruffo, the former Navy officer who now worked for GDMA. When the children returned from the cruise, they told Marcy about the dinner. Marcy had never met Leonard, but she knew he'd been paying for vacations to Cambodia for her husband and his family, and she suspected Michael was sleeping with other women and that Leonard was a bad influence. Despite the talk of divorce, she felt jilted and furious Michael was allowing her children to be around Leonard. Marcy agonized over what to do, and then she made a momentous decision. She set up a meeting with the Chief of Staff of the 7th Fleet on the base. In the meeting, she reported her husband's suspected adultery, and she handed over emails from Michael about his vacations in Cambodia.
I mean, I pretty much sealed my fate with my marriage in the fact that I've turned over every dirty little thing I could based on Michael's history of the things he did.
What did you turn over?
Emails between him and the woman he had his affair with.
Credit card statements to show that he was living beyond his means, that kind of thing?
Right. Also, some of the pictures he sent me from Cambodia stating that he was there by means which neither of us could speak of. Well, then I knew that. So I turned all that over.
Marcy had grown to believe her husband was taking corrupt payouts. Some Navy spouses enjoyed the lifestyle and stayed quiet. But Marcy, fired by indignation about Michael's adultery, took action. She began to suspect the Gucci purse that he'd gifted her was not, in fact, a present from Michael.
Because here's the thing, Tom, yes, I got that purse, but I didn't know where it came from. And I did not want, I don't know if I can even say it would be one way if we were getting along, because I probably still would have been telling him, this isn't right. What are you doing? We shouldn't be doing this. But I did not want anyone, Navy or otherwise, to think that I was in agreement with this, or that I agreed with all this, or that I was party to it.
The next month, Marcy says an NCIS agent named Erica Mariner called her in for an interview. Dressed in jeans with a polo shirt, her NCIS badge on her belt, Mariner had long black hair and a steely manner. Marcy's information had been woven with other strands the NCIS was collecting about Leonard. And what Mariner told Marcy stopped her dead in her tracks.
I don't know the whole scope of this whole investigation at that point. You know, when I sat down with NCIS, Agent Mariner told me, do you realize that, you know, Michael's involved with this person and he's being investigated for taking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars from the Navy? Well, no, I didn't really realize all that.
Michael was on the NCIS radar, not for adultery or breaking the Navy's policy on receiving gifts, but as part of a major criminal investigation. And Agent Beliveau, accessing KNet that day, knew that Marcy was cooperating. Beliveau immediately contacted Leonard by Skype, warning him about Marcy and telling him to keep his distance from Michael now that he was under investigation, court documents show.
Don't trust him. Never email or text him. Never speak on the phone with him. Sopranos. Trust me. Only in person with noise, and protect yourself through bugs.
The NCIS agent was educating Leonard in the arts of spycraft. But Leonard disregarded the advice. He'd been untouchable for too long, and that bred an arrogance in him. Instead, Leonard did exactly what Beliveau had warned him against. He emailed Michael, letting him know about his wife and the NCIS investigation. Michael immediately deleted his private email accounts, one called Little Bro LGF, or Little Brother of Leonard Glenn Francis. But he decided not to tell Marcy that he knew about her cooperation.
If Michael tells me that he's heard from Leonard, that's only going to make him look, obviously guilty. He's not going to tell me.
Right. So Michael keeps that to himself.
Yeah, I mean, we never had that conversation.
After meeting NCIS agent Mariner, Marcy finally had transferred back to the US, relocating to Shannon, Illinois, near where she'd first met Michael in high school. She filed for divorce and got a job in a bank. Although their life together was ending, Marcy felt wretched about what she'd unleashed.
I mean, at that point, I was as spent and bedraggled as a person could be. You know, I'm trying to reacclimate my kids to living stateside. My marriage is ending. And there was a little bit of, oh my God, what have I done? At the same time, it's like I couldn't know this stuff and be party or privy to it and not, it just wasn't right.
Another NCIS agent visited Marcy in her home in Illinois. But by now, she was distraught, trying to keep her family together, and she'd lost faith in the Navy's judicial process. She stopped responding to phone calls from NCIS agents. Again, Leonard thought he had the situation under control. But he'd been careless. As agents monitored Michael's email, they saw the warning from Leonard about Marcy. How could he possibly know about this secret investigation and Marcy's cooperation? The NCIS ordered its cybersecurity teams to look into who could have tipped Leonard off, and they soon came across a stupefying fact. Agent Beliveau, who was not assigned to the case, had been downloading hundreds of pages of investigative documents from KNet, all at night and on public holidays. A review of security footage showed Beliveau using a CD burner to take the files out of the office without detection.
Tokyo, 2012.
On November the 30th, a chauffeured Mercedes picked up Michael for the hour-long drive from the USS Blue Ridge to the Ritz-Carlton in Tokyo. There, Leonard was waiting for him in his suite, with spectacular views of the city and Mount Fuji, according to court documents. Even knowing Michael was under investigation didn't stop Leonard. The NCIS had never acted before. Why would it do so now? In the room, Michael, Leonard, and another officer pored over organizational charts of the 7th Fleet. Michael, too, would soon relocate back to the US, and the conspirators were looking for another officer to fill his shoes. Then, Michael handed over an envelope filled with 40 pages of classified material. Ship schedules stamped secret covering the next 14 months, according to court records. The wad of documents also included the positions of top-secret US ballistic missile defenses in Asia. These defenses would protect US allies like Taiwan in the event of a Chinese missile attack. They remain classified until today. It's not clear why Michael would hand over this kind of classified material or what benefit it gave Leonard. And it seems unlikely Michael knowingly was acting against US national security interests. Perhaps it was a mistake. Here's something I really don't understand, right? So Beliveau tells you that they're looking into Misiewicz, right?
Mm-hmm.
He tells you, be careful with Misiewicz. But then you continue to meet Misiewicz. But it also means you weren't really at all worried about these NCIS investigations that Beliveau was telling you about, right?
No, because I was always ahead of the game. I knew what was going on. I had top cover. I had intelligence. I had the fleet protecting me. I had the admirals behind my back, Everybody knew I was under investigation. The flag officers knew. They were still whining and dining me in their official residences.
Whether admirals knew he was under investigation, I don't know. But while the NCIS probe moved forward, Leonard rubbed shoulders with the highest-ranked admirals at Navy events aboard the Blue Ridge, in Hawaii, and Annapolis, media reports show. Leonard just couldn't imagine the Navy cleaning house and dealing with the festering sore at its heart. Then, Agent Beliveau contacted him with an even worse piece of news. The NCIS, realizing the severity of the security breach with Michael, had roped in the Justice Department. This was no longer purely a Navy matter. The FBI was involved.
He starts telling me about all these open investigations that are out there, and that he starts telling me that this investigation has feet because DOJ is involved.
Right. And until that point, DOJ had never been involved. This had just been internal Navy answers, right?
No. So when the Department of Justice is involved, then you got prosecutors involved.
Beliveau warned Leonard by text to take precautions. A grand jury was considering charges.
Indictments are coming. Did you dump your Gmail? I cleaned it. Maybe not best to send me anything from your Gmail account. Delete all contacts and boxes, and delete your trash bin.
Oh, yeah. He was advising me on how to evade and clean up all the servers and, counter intelligence on it. Yes.
And did you follow any of that?
Well, I basically kind of followed through with some things because, I had my own IT folks working for me. And then what we did was we just shifted to a Chinese server, a PRC server for protection for all my back channel work that I was doing with all my moles.
And did that work?
Yeah, in a way it did, but, it was a bit difficult because it was hard for us to communicate with the guys on the ship when they're on deployment. The Chinese servers just didn't kind of work well.
The security risk of US ballistic missile defense documents being hidden from the NCIS on a Chinese server is hard to overstate. One thing Leonard didn't do fast enough was close his Gmail accounts. Just before he got around to doing that, agents had sent what's called a preservation hold to Google. They kept all details of the account, even though Leonard thought it was deleted. By this point, the NCIS and feds were monitoring Beliveau. The NCIS knew they had a mole, and so they set up a top-secret group to investigate Leonard. The hand-picked team of agents signed non-disclosure agreements. Even many top admirals were not informed of the unit's existence. To get Beliveau and Leonard off their trail, agents planted fake documents in the NCIS database that the investigations against Leonard were closed and no charges would be filed. It worked. The cases are closing, Leonard wrote Michael in an email. It was, thought Leonard, the resumption of business as usual.
San Diego, 2013.
Well, actually, I nearly missed that flight. And when I arrived, they had a buggy ready for me and just shuttled me right up to the aircraft. Normally when you check in, even though you're flying, first class, you still got to be there like 30 minutes. I got there like 15 minutes. So I could have missed that flight. I could have actually not been on that trip.
In September, Leonard was on the way to San Diego to go win some more business from the Navy. He thought the cases were closed. He even had a plan to go to Colombia on vacation with Agent Beliveau after meeting Navy admirals. If anything, Leonard thought he might just have to repay some money to the US government, some kind of fine. That's how untouchable he'd been for years. He thought himself indispensable.
I flew in with my eyes open. It wasn't that, I didn't know. I was not naive or dumb about it, I knew the chances were very high because I was warned and warned and warned by Beliveau. Although I knew there was an indictment, I knew that the Department of Justice were involved. So I thought that it wasn't as serious as what it was. I never was concerned because, I had the best attorneys, I had everything, And I actually didn't think that the Navy would allow this to happen because if GDMA went down, that would affect them at the same time, but they didn't care.
When Leonard landed at LAX, he was bundled into a room by immigration officers for questioning about the purpose of his visit. This was unusual, but Leonard thought little of it.
So what was happening was they were holding us up so that the agents would get in position to start trailing us.
After an hour, Leonard was allowed into the US and he was driven to a Marriott in San Diego, where he checked into a suite. He met for dinner with former Navy officers who now worked for GDMA, including Ed Arufo. They went to Nobu for dinner with their wives. The next day, Leonard gave a PowerPoint presentation to the Navy about a new round of contracts that he hoped to win.
We returned back to the Marriott, got changed. I was going to plan to leave the next day to Beverly Hills. And it was like mid-morning, probably about 12:31. The doorbell rang, ding dong. And then I opened the door and then I saw there was this guy and female, male in suits. And then they said, "Oh, I'm so-and-so, I'm NCIS. Could we talk to you? We want to talk to you." I said, "Sure."
The NCIS agents were just there to assure Leonard was in the room. They asked him some vague questions about bribery in the Navy.
So he's just trying to have small talk with me at the same time. They're just observing things that's going on and all that. And then we spoke for about like 10, 15 minutes. And then they go, "Okay, we got to go." So as soon as they stepped out the door, we had a posse of agents and SWAT team. My God, it was like crazy. Like they were like coming in to take some drug lord. They came running in with guns blazing. And then, slammed me against the wall and then put me on a chair, started frisking me, checking me, everything.
You didn't resist arrest, right?
Oh, no. What was there to resist? It's the overwhelming force. I mean, I'm a big guy, but it was overwhelming force at 5 hours.
In a coordinated action, the FBI arrested John Beliveau in Virginia, Ed Arufo in San Diego, and Michael Misiewicz in Colorado, where he'd been transferred after Japan. When Marcy heard the news, she traveled over from Illinois to bail him out. Like many newly arrested people, Michael was delusional.
He was a nervous wreck. I mean, he was just, I don't know why they're asking this stuff. And many conversations of maybe I just need to put in my papers now and retire. My whole plan was to command at sea. I did that.
As the news flowed out into the international media about Michael's crimes, especially the prostitutes, Marcy was embarrassed and seething. His avowals of culpability to her shortly after his arrest didn't last long.
At one point, Michael had told Merrick that I was the reason he went to jail, and I would be the reason that he would go back to jail. If this was after he was bailed out in Colorado. Well, your mom is the reason I was in prison, and if I go back to prison, it will be her fault. I didn't really think he needed to tell the 14-year-old that, but that's just me.
You told me he also defended himself by saying, look, these weren't street hookers, these were college girls.
These were, young women you'd see on any college campus. His need to deflect any sort of guilt from himself and have to point fingers at, well, they weren't this kind of prostitutes, they were this kind of prostitutes. Well, maybe I did wrong, but if I go back to jail, it was your mom's fault, not mine. It's not anything I did.
Michael pleaded not guilty at first, but faced with a much longer sentence, changed his plea. He admitted to 1 count of conspiracy and 1 count of bribery. Before going to jail, he gave an interview in which he argued Leonard played an important strategic role for the US Navy. He was a crook, but he was our crook, he said. In April 2016, Michael was given a jail term of 78 months, one of the longest sentences handed out yet, due to the top-secret ballistic missile defense documents he'd provided to Leonard. Agent Beliveau pleaded guilty and was given 12 years, which he's still serving, the longest jail term meted out so far. My attempts to reach him were unsuccessful. Arufo, who has pleaded guilty to running a fake invoicing scam for Leonard's company in Japan, is awaiting sentencing. He answered a few questions on Facebook, as mentioned in earlier episodes. He recently passed the California bar exam, pulled his study notes together as a book, and is running classes for aspiring lawyers. Michael served his time in a low-security jail in Lompoc, California. One of his cellmates was a parent sentenced in the college admissions scandal. Marcy called it Club Fed. In the summer of 2020, he was allowed into house arrest due to COVID after 4 years in jail. He's due to be released fully next spring after serving 5.5 years, about a year less than his original sentence. He did not respond to my efforts to get in touch with him. Marcy is making the best of things, surrounded by a loving family. She still goes down to see Michael's Cambodian relatives in Texas, but has cut off most ties with her ex. Despite everything that's happened, her eldest son is in his final year at the Naval Academy, where his father studied all those years ago. There's little contact between father and son. How do you feel about the Navy after everything that's happened?
Because of the Navy, I've been able to see and do some pretty awesome things. And in hindsight, I probably would do some things differently. But, I've made some of the greatest friendships in my life because of the Navy. I've always tried to instill in my kids to be good patriots, to be patriotic.
But Marcy's wondering, as indeed am I, why more Navy admirals haven't faced more severe punishment. Well, isn't part of the problem that it was given cover from the very top admirals?
Yes, right. What do you do?
And what about justice here? Because, we've talked about you and you've had to struggle with your kids and the assets frozen and everything. Some of the admirals who helped Leonard by moving ships for them or getting fuel from expensive places to help him make more money and going to parties and sleeping with prostitutes, some of them retired without any demotion of rank. They didn't go to jail. They were dealt with inside the Navy system.
I picture this whole Michael handing the envelope over that was the ballistic missile, that information. It sounds like some scene from a movie. But other than that piece, I think what did he do that's any different than what some of these others have done? There's prostitutes, there's tickets, there's meals, there's all this other stuff. And Michael was sentenced to 78 months. And other people got a letter, oh, you should have done that. Here's your letter of censure, but go on your way. No assets were frozen. Their GI Bill wasn't taken away. They've even been able to stay active duty. Some have even continued to serve. So it's beyond my comprehension.
The problem for the Navy was that as Leonard started to talk, it dawned on investigators just how many officers were involved with him. Not just commanders like Michael, but captains and even admirals. That's why, 8 years after his arrest, Leonard, possibly one of the longest-serving cooperating witnesses in US judicial history, has still not been sentenced. In our concluding episode to Fat Leonard, we'll hear how, despite the arrest of mid-level players, the Navy moved to protect its elite. It wasn't willing to go after some of the most powerful admirals in the fleet. the lower ranks are furious in the US Navy because they feel like they do want to see these admirals go down and there to be some accountability.
And it's never going to happen. It doesn't happen in the United States military institution. That's how it is.
Fat Leonard is a production of Project Brazen in partnership with PRX. For Audiation, the executive producer is Sandy Smollins. Mark Lotto is the co-producer and story editor. The producer is Ilan Meacham. Mixing and sound design is by Matt Noble.